Second program of 2015. Here we are again. Paul Brennan in Wellington and...
Martin Noakes in Wellington again.
How you doing there, Martin?
Pretty good, thanks.
Okay, getting into the swing of the year now.
Oh, yeah.
And to start, oh my gosh, Martin, the footage of that TransAsia ATR-72 crashing into the river in Taipei. My golly.
Pretty dramatic.
Gosh, don't those dash cams deliver.
It is just amazing, yeah. The proliferance of dash cams due to insurance problems has led to some pretty spectacular aircraft crashes being captured.
And also great opportunities for media to view or to play footage that just you'd never see.
You'd never have had, no.
In a previous life. And I've looked at that footage and it looks like the aircraft's in a stall.
Yep.
It's coming down sort of pancaking with a bit of forward speed. People are saying, look at the prop, it's not turning.
Yep.
One of the pilots in their Mayday call said that there'd been an engine flameout.
Yep.
58 people on board,
Yep.
so that's almost a full load.
Brand new plane.
April last year, wasn't it? Delivered.
Yeah. Bet that taxi driver was surprised when the wing clipped him.
Yeah, and he survived.
Yep.
And took quite a hit there. But I wonder how that happened.
Yeah.
It's too early to say, I know. But
They were pretty low when it happened by the looks of things. You know, you're watching it almost cartwheeling over that freeway, landing in the river, and a few people got out. What, 16 got out?
yeah, apparently the folk in the forward fuselage were the ones that really copped it, from what I've read. Though it looks like he was, or she was, heading for the river.
Yes, it looked like they'd... Serious problem. Now, normally that plane should be able to take off on one engine, so something else must have happened.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Everyone's saying it's totally flyable on one engine.
Yeah,
Fully loaded in every condition.
yeah. I guess those dashcam photos will come out very, very useful. They'll be looking at the prop and the engine configuration very closely.
You notice how the wing just drops?
Yeah.
If you look at the footage, you can see that that's the point of the ultimate stall. Yeah, it just drops. And
Dropped
that's
a
it.
wing, clipped the barrier, spun into the river.
Almost made it.
It's pretty close.
It'll be fascinating to see what comes out of that, and just amazing to see that footage.
It is amazing.
I'd be interested to know, just as a matter of curiosity, how much that would be worth, that footage, if you had that on your dash cam. That's global footage. That could be worth in the tens of thousands, for news organisations.
Yeah. Yeah, it drives views and all that type of thing,
Oh.
yeah. I wonder if he sold it or whether he just put it out there. What normally happens in cases like this, though, is those marketing agencies for stuff like that contact the owner almost immediately and take it off him
And then
they
on-sell.
They split it and then they on-sell.
But if you're
yeah.
savvy, you know it's going to end up on CNN, BBC, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah. Probably 300 or 400 million people are going to see it. There's some value there. So we'll see what happens there. AirAsia X. What do we know now? Last program we were speculating, was there any similarity here with Air France 447, as you would. So what's this about the captain being out of his seat, resetting a flight computer? And I've seen A320 pilots comment that this was not a normal procedure. This was a desperation move. So if you reverse engineer that, you're really scratching your head, aren't you?
Well, it's either a desperation move or a pretty big mistake because he disconnected. He took the breaker out of the FAC, one of the flight control computers, and in order to do that, he had to get out of his seat, get up behind the co-pilot where the panel's located,
Yeah.
and pull the breaker. If you need to reset the FAC computer, there are switches on the overhead panel right above him that he could have pushed to reset it. And so they're wondering why he felt the need to actually get up out of his seat and go behind the co-pilot.
I believe the captain was very experienced with thousands of hours on the type. So you sort of got to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's done enough flying to know in different conditions what this aircraft does. So that indicates his belief that something dramatic was required, or he was off his rocker.
Well, I guess that's what they're trying to find out. But what disconnecting that computer did is it removed the flight envelope protection. So the plane's flyable, but in complete manual mode.
Right.
So if you pull very hard back on the stick, the plane goes back very hard, harder than it would possibly be able to handle at that altitude
And
that speed.
controllability at that altitude and speed
Yeah.
is different from down low. So, okay, so there are some slight similarities with 447 in that the captain wasn't in the seat at the time.
Yes, exactly. Yes, he was distracted doing something else, possibly trying to fix something, what he thought was a grave problem, but unfortunately it didn't work.
What would be, I'm no A320 pilot, and I know there are different modes to fly the aircraft in, and I'm sure they were flying in the mode appropriate at the time. So you wonder what sort of onset of circumstances ended with him physically getting out of a seat and doing that dramatic action.
And removing the envelope protection. Yeah. You wonder-
Either willfully or inadvertently, but
Oh, you're pretty willful. You know, it's a big thing to do.
So you do that with the knowledge it's going to have X, Y, and Z consequences.
If he's an experienced,
if you know the aircraft.
He's an experienced captain with thousands of hours experience, so you would expect that he'd know what the result of that would be.
Presumably they, being the authorities, have quite a good idea of what unfolded.
You think they'll get there pretty soon. There should be an announcement in the next week or two, I expect.
Because there's 2 hours, I think, of cockpit communication.
Yeah.
That's quite a long time.
It is. So, they've got plenty to go on. And, of course, they've got all the position of all the control surfaces and the speed and the altitude and the attitude and all of that, so they'll get to a conclusion pretty quickly.
Of course, everyone will want to know, is this a situation brought about by, a freak circumstance, a lapse in maintenance? You know, there are question marks here.
Yes, that's why it's going to be very interesting to see what the results of the inquiry are.
All right, is the time up for the Queen of the Skies? We have to ask that question now, prompted by news in the last week or so that the US Air Force are out looking for another aircraft to carry around the president's ride, of course known as Air Force One, but only when he's on it, I think.
Yes.
Otherwise it refers to its serial number.
Yep.
And it's, VC-25 or something? Is the Air Force designation for it. So obviously the 8 intercontinental passenger version probably be the last, won't they?
There's been some news from some Boeing suppliers that have been told basically to write off any investment they've made in the rest of the program. There's apparently 68 still to go, 30 of which are unsold at their current production rate.
Right.
But obviously they're signalling to the suppliers that they don't feel there's much likelihood of those 30 unbuilt ones being sold. And so they're telling the suppliers that supply parts for this particular program to write down those costs.
Okay, so that really is, code for we're probably going to wind it up.
Yeah, we're pretty
When
much
do you think?
Next year or two.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That's soon.
Yeah.
So half that production figure is unsold.
Yes.
Is the freight market going to change anytime soon?
No, they've got white-tail freighters sitting around, so even if it does, they've probably got a few they can give to people. And they had big hopes for it. They thought they were going to sell a lot of them, and they've sold very few indeed.
Okay, so that'll be probably, 5 decades by the time the whole program winds up, probably?
Yes, but the amazing thing about the 747, unfortunately, is how quickly it's disappeared. I mean, they used to be everywhere, and now you really see them. Yeah,
they're just dropping out of fleets like you wouldn't believe. BA still has over 40 of them, but they're the exception.
Yeah, BA, Qantas still has a few, don't they? Not many.
But it's down to, 12, 13, something like that. It used to be 30 plus.
Yes, it used to be a lot.
Yeah, they're all sitting there and not going anywhere.
No.
They'd make great hotels.
Oh, yeah.
Martin, we could talk about that all day.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. Remember, the new build DC-7s were coming off the line at the same time as new build 707s. And within about 2 years of that, no more DC-7s were being made.
Yeah, they had amazing quick turnarounds. I looking at a photo of a Lockheed Constellation for KLM, it had 4 years life.
Yes.
You know?
They were right on the cusp. And while they were good for a few years, that was it.
Yeah. And another development in the 748 saga, it's a bit ironic, they've made an unsolicited proposal to Emirates, we've just heard, for 100 747-8s.
100?
100.
So that's matching, obviously, the potential A380 Neo order, right?
Informal proposal, but this is interesting. They haven't gone to Tim Clark, the guy who runs Emirates. They've gone to the Sheikh, who is chairman of the board. So they've gone over his head.
How would you characterise a move like that? Is that an honourable thing to do, or is that just business?
It's a desperate thing to do. I don't think it's going to happen. I seem to remember that shortly before Emirates purchased the last chunk of 48 A380s, Boeing did something very similar. This time they went to Tim Clark and offered him cut price 747-8s, and he came out publicly and said quite clearly that he didn't think that was the plane for the job and they won't be buying it.
And also, it's an issue of marketing and branding. Everyone knows the A380 is the Emirates flagship. They've built a whole product line around it, including showers.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that probably in the 74, so that won't work. And also they know that there is no more 747.
There is no more 747.
There's no development path there. They know with the A380 that potentially there's a stretch there, and there's another 30, 40 years of business model life in it. That's not there for the 74. I'm assuming, I haven't read too much about this, saw the headline, but I'm assuming that Boeing is desperate to keep the production line open long enough, to deliver the Air Force Ones?
But I can't.
Otherwise, they will have to keep it open with no production going through it. And
for a
that's
little
very
while.
costly,
Well, they've got those 30 unsold frames that are scheduled in to be built. So, yes, they're desperately looking for some way to prolong it. But it's a bit of a crazy thing to do because Emirates is also a huge order of the 777-9X.
Well, they must feel quite secure in that order to be able to go then do this pitch.
But how can you pitch a 747-8 to Emirates, which is a plane which is only going to have 60 to 80 seats more than the 777-9
well, you do
at best?
if you're giving it away.
Yeah, but still.
If it's so ridiculously cheap that, no one can turn it down.
Yeah, but that's silly thinking. That's devaluing your own product. And also, if someone offered me a three-wheeled car, I still wouldn't want it, even if it was for free.
What if I came to the Sheikh and said, look, we'll give you 100 747-8 Intercontinentals for $75 million US apiece, and you set up a low-cost carrier, global low-cost carrier, it's a no-brainer.
It still doesn't make sense. If it's not economic to run...
But it might be in that context, is what I'm saying. And then it doesn't cannibalise any Emirates positioning in the marketplace and how they use the A380 as a premium product, etc.
Yeah, no, I think...
it's a stretch, I know.
Yeah, no, it's not... I'd be very surprised if it happens.
Okay, interesting little twist.
See what happens,
See what happens. Meanwhile, on the very large aircraft side, talk of Turkey going to the A380, that talk's been around a long time, but seems to be maybe firming up into something that has to be timed with the new airport, doesn't it? Because they don't actually have capacity at their Istanbul hub to accommodate this aircraft at the moment. So there's no point in having it right now.
Yeah, that's what they're
They've
saying.
got a new airport under construction, though, haven't they?
It's under construction, and so they had ordered 10 in to coincide with the opening of that new airport, which apparently it's going to be capacity constrained immediately anyway, so they need bigger planes with more people on them as soon as they can get them.
And they'd have dedicated facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The giveaway will be to people looking at the plans and looking who the air bridge supplier is, and if they've ordered double-decker air bridges...
It's a no-brainer.
It's a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, that's how you know. You can't hold back on that one. So if that order comes through, that's good for the program right at this point.
It is good for the program. It's also, there's a lot of doom and gloom about the A380, but when a guy like Tim Clark says, listen, if you build us a new one, we'll order, 100, 150 of them?
100, I think you went for.
100. That's a pretty good endorsement.
Well, that would lift the production up to close to 500.
Exactly.
That's on the way.
And they wouldn't be the only ones taking NEOs, because there's all the copycat airlines in the Middle East. They then have to have NEOs, so they'd all order another 50. Remember, the 747 took a long time to get off the ground because everyone said it's too big. No one will ever need to fly that many people.
That's right, yeah.
It wallowed for 5 or 6 years, the 747
and then
program.
it got hit by the fuel shock as well.
Yeah.
Only really came into its own, actually, with the 400.
Yeah, I suppose
biggest selling version.
Yeah.
But maybe Turkey and any other airline would say to Airbus now, yeah, interested in the A380, but it's got to be the NEO.
I think Cathay Pacific. I've always thought that Cathay Pacific would be a NEO candidate. They need to fly a lot of people to capacity-constrained airports, and that A380 going out of Hong Kong, I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years they order it.
And they had a lot of 74s.
They did. And they're a big Airbus customer.
Last program we talked about the PC-12 coming to New Zealand. It does seem that the PC-12 that you mentioned at the Wings Over Wairarapa Air Show was actually here with Sounds Air. So that was in the works.
I should have gone and spoken to them then, eh?
Apparently, it might have been seen flying around a few places around the country. So maybe they're doing a bit of familiarisation with it or whatever. Look out for it. But the news came in the last week that the air service from Whakatane through to Auckland now has been, or will be taken over by Air Chatham using their Convair, 580s.
Yeah, how cool is that?
That's a 50-seater with all the seats in, or half that and plenty of freight. I mean, that's a huge capacity increase, isn't it?
Yeah. It's almost worth looking at a flight to Whakatane just to get to go on an old Convair.
Well, for a start, it's going to be quick because they're fast.
Yeah,
you're going to be there in 25 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah.
And you're going to leave a nice little trail of smoke.
Yes.
And it's got a nice hum about it from those Allisons. Craig Emery, who runs the airline, I met him in the past before, flown out to the Chathams on one of their Convairs. Fantastic experience. We can talk about that one day and show a bit of video. But he must be able to fit this into what he does regularly without it being a drain, And, of course, those local bodies, if you want to propose an air service and you can deliver on that, they're going to be listening to you. They want their air services.
Yeah, they need them.
There's got to be some subsidy.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
It is a good time and a very interesting airplane. Great airplane.
Yeah. An aviation tourism attraction in its own right.
Yeah.
Go fly a Convair.
Yeah,
You'd probably do it in Canada. Anywhere else in the world you could fly one of those things for
I
a passenger?
really don't know where other passenger services convoys are. I wouldn't have thought there's many places at all.
No. Really, those opportunities have been filled now in a very short time.
Very short time. Didn't take long at all, did it? No.
PC-12,
Yeah.
representing modernity and everything that's cool, with absolute classic representing in its day because that was a fantastic airliner.
Yeah.
Convair, wasn't it? Big, probably could claim to be the DC-3 replacement.
Yeah, pretty much.
On numbers.
I mean, there's a lot of them still around, and they seem to have an endless life. I mean, there's that program that converts them. You can still give them an old Convair 340, the piston engine one, and they can convert it all the way up to a 5800. So extended and with turboprops.
That's the stretch, right?
Yeah.
And they're quite big, the stretch ones. I've seen them at Auckland.
If you're interested in those conversions, the website to go and look at is Kelowna Flightcraft in Canada.
All right, there you go. Staying here at home, the Air Accident Investigation Commission, or whatever they called, have been looking into this incident a few years ago. I think back in 2012 now, quite a way back, where the RNZAF 757 went to Pegasus Field on the ice Antarctica and passed the point of no return. I've got to admit, I was a bit surprised that the 75 had a point of no return for that flight, because you wouldn't think they'd be operating an aircraft that
Well, I would have thought,
couldn't sort of make it back.
I was a bit surprised because I just assumed it had fuel tanks in the hold.
Yeah, and they've modified it every other which way. But anyway, they were past their point of no return. The weather closed in unexpectedly. Fog, I think, was mentioned, and they weren't able to go and land at any of the other fields, so committed to one field, no alternate. And on the third attempt, landed and only had visibility from 110 feet down. They're saying it was a very close situation, which may be slightly overhyped.
Yes, perhaps.
You know,
I don't.
well, the fact that a minister of the Crown was on board probably makes it a little more sensational in terms of the way the thing is reported.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to die.
I mean, I don't know what facilities the airfield has, but if it has differential GPS, a highly accurate GPS, it's the same as a Category 3 landing.
Even if you're in strife there with visibility, you've still got your radar altimeter, which is very accurate. You've landed the thing dozens of times, so you know exactly the speed, the settings, and what feels right. And you're just waiting for the wheels to touch, aren't you?
As long as they touch in the right place. I mean, as long as the GPS is putting them on the end of the runway and with a sort of less than 50 foot.
It was said that by the head of the Air Force, one Mike Yardley, I heard his quote. He said that it was good that the crew knew the layout of the airfield where the sheds were and all that sort of stuff, indicating there might have actually been some peripheral visibility.
Yeah, well, they say
to
they
position yourself,
broke out at about 30 meters, eh?
Yeah.
So
yeah, your sort of regular Northern Hemisphere winter ILS approach on any particular day, isn't it?
Yeah, to a well-kitted out airfield. But these guys are the Air Force, so they should be able to handle it.
It was in the era of the helicopter crash that happened near Wellington. I think it was on an Anzac Day, which was horrible. But there did seem to be, and it was mentioned in inquiries, for want of a better expression, gung-ho attitude that might have had them take more risks. But, I mean, I don't know. They made it back. Any landing you walk away from is a good one.
Yeah, they seem to handle it okay.
Yeah. Back to crashes, MH370, what was it, declared officially an accident?
Yeah.
Which means a whole sort of raft of things can happen now. Compensation can be paid out, at a standard rate per passenger, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's all worked out, yeah.
Now, what's this about search vessels grouping together in a particular area? Is that a coincidence? And what is the link to a position that was put out by the US in the early stages of that aircraft disappearing?
So that is very interesting, yeah. They issued the report they had to issue by law before a year was up after the accident. And when they issued the report, people looking at satellite pictures noticed that all three of the search ships which are engaged in the search are coincidentally or otherwise all quite closely grouped in the area put out by the White House 5 days after the accident. Yeah.
So is this being seen as a coincidence or more than a coincidence?
Well, the report I read seemed to think it was more than a coincidence, that they've all focused back on the one spot.
And what is that position compared to the one we're all familiar with off the coast of Perth by about 1,100 miles?
Yeah, it's that, because that's where the White House, that's where the wreckage, where they initially thought they spotted wreckage and all that.
Right.
So yeah, it's 1,100 miles southwest or something of Perth. Yeah.
Right. Of course, anything drifting or on the surface is like on the other side of the world by now.
Oh yeah.
So it's debris on the seafloor that can only be what can be found. It's still very challenging, isn't it?
Very.
So, well, it's like they still know where it is.
Well, they've either worked out that that's where it must be, or they've really got absolutely no idea, so they're going back to square one and going to work out from there.
The timing of this official declaration of it being an accident has any...
Well, that's what they seem to think. The coincidence is, well, look, you're announcing this as your first official, or your second official report, and at that time, all the ships are back in the same spot. Why? And when are you going to tell us?
All right, so more to come on that. I mean, if they are right and something's going on, then surely it shouldn't be too long before, a bit of wreckage or something surfaces.
Yeah, well, that's...
I mean, that'd be the thing to look for,
I think
wouldn't it?
we're all holding out for that, aren't we?
All right, a couple of quick items regarding safety. There's been a whole rash of Microlight crashes. Our most recent one in Timaru. A well-known instructor in his mid-80s and a local police sergeant were killed. Just one of many. Actually, if you look at the list, there's been quite a few over the last few years. CAA are looking into it now. They're saying, there could be a link here. I've flown on a few Microlights. Mm-hmm. I don't know about it.
My neighbour in South Africa died in a Microlight crash.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, and it just lost control at about 120 feet and dove in. One of the control wires snapped.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's what they'll be looking into. I guess a lot of them are, kits that are assembled?
Yep.
And you've really got to trust the workmanship or the workpersonship of whoever put it together if you're flying around with them.
There was another related Microlight incident in the little suburb I lived in South Africa. There was an old general store that had been converted into a factory by a guy who was assembling Microlights for people. And these had those Rotax two-stroke engines.
Right.
And he would insist on testing them at all hours of the day.
Oh.
And one of the neighbours went and shot up all the planes in his shop due to the noise he was making one Sunday afternoon.
Sounds like you come from the Wild West.
Yeah.
It does seem to be that people who fly Microlights are generally in the older age groups. And I wonder if that may in some way... I'm not saying that, they shouldn't be flying or anything like that, but, reactions are slow, confusion can set in for some. I don't know. It's like there are always more road crashes in Tauranga because of elderly retirees.
Ooh, Paul, you're skating on thin ice there, mate.
That may not be the case now, but it was when I lived there back in the 80s. The panel repairers did great business there. Okay, so we'll be interested to see what the investigation by CEA comes up with. But they always say this could take years.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Don't hold your breath.
We'll hear any time soon. Dubai, now the busiest international airport, taken over from Heathrow.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Yeah? There's one airline that does that.
If you look on Flight Radar 24 at the conveyor belt of planes just pouring into that airport all the time.
And, of course, then there's that Fly Dubai airline, which has got like about 80 737s based there as well.
Yeah. And, I mean, there's just so many airlines going in there now. It's incredible.
Okay. Yeah. And Qantas, of course. So Heathrow's lost its mojo there. Probably won't get it back either.
Probably not, no.
Singapore, premium economy. Is this something they've taken ages to do?
Ages.
How come they resisted it?
I don't know. I mean, they were quite against it at one stage, but I guess they have to follow the market because it's turning into quite a popular product. I guess they thought, and they were probably right, for a while their economy was pretty good anyway. But maybe they're going down the line, well, we put premium economy and we can pack economy in even tighter.
What it says to me is that they're under competitive attack.
Well, they must be.
And they're having to somehow raise the perception of the lower end product, right?
Or they've just worked out that there's more people willing to pay for premium economy than there, as well as business class, as well as economy. Just make more money because you give 4 inches extra leg room and you can charge another $1,500.
And if you know that a percentage of your economy customers on any particular one flight would happily opt for a slightly more premium experience with an extra cost, why wouldn't you take the money from them?
Yeah, and I reckon that's just what they're doing. They've let everyone else do the market research.
Yeah, well, in New Zealand, they probably looked at them pretty closely. They were a real early adopter of that, weren't they?
And it might be part of this alliance thing, this code sharing, maybe.
Sort of aligning the products.
Yeah, because if you've bought a premium economy seat to Europe and then you get on the Singapore Airlines leg and they don't have premium economy, you'd be pretty sour, wouldn't
Next
you?
They'll have cuddle class,
There you go. It'll be
do you think any airline from a Muslim country would ever have cuddle class? All right, so that pretty well covers everything that's been going on in the world of aviation. I think that we'll have an aircraft of the day, and because I think we can see the writing on the wall of the old 747, Martin, our aircraft of the day should be the 747.
Yeah.
And let's just reflect for a few minutes on the contribution that this aircraft has made to civilization.
Yes, I mean, it's probably the aircraft of the last 50 years or the aircraft of the century or whatever. It's pretty amazing.
And it does define, along with the space program at the time, but I guess people can relate to it more because chances are most people have seen a 747 or been on one at some point in their life, is that it was the pinnacle of the age of the engineer where anything could be engineered.
Yeah.
Give us a problem, we'll solve it.
Yeah, we'll just fix it.
And the boldness of that thinking, I guess it's still around. Is it still here?
I think we've
like
still
it
got
used to be?
We've still got guys like Elon Musk and maybe Google. Maybe they're not building 400-ton airplanes, but they're still doing pretty clever stuff.
Yeah.
And don't forget, the 747 had a tremendously difficult berth.
Well, it did. It came out of two things. What? The failure to get the very large transport aircraft for the US Air Force.
Yeah.
C-5 got that. But also, it was right around that time of supersonic flight sort of trying to punch into the scene.
Yeah.
And they had that huge Boeing, what was it, 2707?
2707, yeah.
300 passengers Mach 3,
Yeah.
I think titanium fuselage.
And all the up-and-coming engineers, the ambitious
On that
engineers,
one.
they all wanted to try and work on the supersonic program
Yeah.
because they thought that was going to make their career.
It was also fully funded by the taxpayer
Yeah.
at that stage, Nixon's.
So the 747 program couldn't keep people, and yet then when the supersonic program got cancelled, all the engineers wanted to come and try and take bits of the 747 program off the guys. So,
yeah, that's right. It became they all tried to swoop on it.
But he was pretty hard, and you've met him, haven't you?
Joe Sutter?
Yeah?
No, I haven't
Ah.
actually met Joe Sutter, but I've met a few people at the Museum of Flight who are retired Boeing guys who, were involved in that program. I've read his book. The thing about the 747, though, if you read Sutter's book, is that they actually didn't expect to sell that many.
No.
It was to keep Pan Am on board because they were their biggest customer, and they had to keep them as a customer. And also, because of the freight market, that's why you've got the cockpit layout and the upper deck there, so you get the freight in, because they thought really the big market's going to be as a freighter.
Yeah, opening nose and slotted in
There'll be
there.
a few passenger versions, but most of them will be freighters. That obviously didn't turn out to
One
be.
thing they did, which I don't think they can do today, well, they could do today if they just did it, is they went from nothing to a flying prototype in an incredible short period of
While
time.
they're building the building. Everything happened in about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it was just amazing.
And they nearly went broke.
And they had all that big problem with the
Well, the engines.
the engine mountings not picking up the thrust properly, and so overlising and fans rubbing and not being able to start in a tailwind and all this type of thing. But they plugged along and they fixed all that, and look where it took them.
They must have made huge money out of it, but also it meant that they dominated the thinking of all the airlines. And they brought out the SP to head off the TriStar, I
Yep.
believe. And
Been on an SP?
I don't think I've been on an SP, but of course they used to come into Welly, the old Qantas ones. So there was the 100, there was the 200, there was the 300, there was the SP, there was the SR, of course,
Yep.
for the Japan. There was the Combi version. Then, of course, 400, biggest seller. There were all those versions proposed in the 90s, remember? The 600, the 700,
Yes.
and the 800, which ended up being built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was always pretty
50-year production run?
It was always pretty good getting onto a 747. When the 777s came out, yeah, it was nice to go on a new plane, but every now and again I'd fly in New Zealand via the States or somewhere, and you'd get on the L74. I tell you, it was like getting into a cathedral.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Noisy, though. If you sat right at the back,
Yeah, well,
you got that
sonic sort of effect
yeah,
from the engines.
really loud.
That buffeting.
Occasionally I was lucky enough to sit right at the front, and it was very loud if you went through a hailstorm or a rainstorm.
Right. I remember
It was
doing
really
a
noisy.
business class on a Qantas one back in the nose coming back, and I remember thinking how much quieter it is up here.
Yeah. Because the plane, once it was cruising and well into its flight, the nose went up.
All right, yeah.
The seats had quite a good recline on them, but because the nose went up,
Oh,
you actually got a bit more recline.
Bonus recline.
Yeah, no, it was
Otherwise
good.
known as premium recline.
I remember sitting right in the nose because there was quite a lot of legroom at the nose. There were about 5 of us, a couple of other passengers, sitting on the floor playing cards one flight.
Oh, wow. They got that little cupboard, eh?
Yeah.
Just at the front there where you put...
Yeah, like
I
a
think-
split cupboard, yeah.
coat rack or something like that.
Yeah.
As we speak, pretty well most of them on the ground now. So
Yeah, they just disappeared, eh?
the era as any. I don't think there are any, apart from Air Force One and maybe a couple of test beds, any classics flying anymore.
No. Oh, apart from Iran Air, they're flying their SP
But I
still,
think
aren't
they're
they?
down to one or something like that.
It's immaculate, though.
Yeah. Isn't that ironic that they're going to be the last, probably?
Yeah, yeah.
There passes an era. Qantas is keeping their first 400 for a museum.
Yep.
We should have done the same.
Where do you put it?
Oh, God. There's plenty of places to put it.
Where can they land it, really?
Do what they do with the Museum of Flight. Pull the thing apart, transport and reassemble it.
You couldn't transport it on New Zealand roads. Where would
Yes,
you?
could. You break it up and transport it and reassemble it? Of course you could.
Because the good thing about Qantas is they fly it to their museum because they've got rated runways at
Yeah,
them.
that's
all
right, yeah.
South Africa did the same thing. They gave one of their 747s to a museum.
I saw that SP landing on a real short runway.
Yeah, like a GA, tiny little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. All good things must come to an end. And
Yep.
I guess one day we'll go to an air show and there'll be a classic 747 flyby.
Yeah.
That guy, the Fry's Electrical, he'll keep his going, won't he?
Yep.
His SP. So, aircraft today is the 747. We could talk for hours about it.
We probably will as in subsequent programs, won't we?
Yeah. But really, I think we can say that we're seeing the end game on that type. So in the meantime, Paul Brennan and
Martin Noakes.
see you around.
Cheers.